Belgium, where there was a child abuse case that being worked up in the next election. And this has really weakened the environmental movement. I mean, in some ways, Greens went letting about what green politics means and become much more radical and much more questioning of conventional wisdom if we're going to have an impact and make an impact in time. And work together with, I mean, I've worked on a couple of commissions seeing that, and that's why now I've proposed recently that we create a permanent, or I know Buddhists don't like the word permanent, so let's call it an ongoing institution, which I call the World Future Council, which is basically based on ideas which the Dalai Lama, President Gorbachev, Václav Havel have come up with in recent times, saying we need a sort of global conscience, we need a body which speaks out for our values, ethical values with you on this, also to learn your perspective working in the South on poverty and poverty eradication in an age of so-called globalization, because of course we don't really have any real globalization. We have an economic, corporate-led globalization benefiting the rich, benefiting a small minority. It's only terrorism, because of course it is the big threat to our global elite, who are not threatened by TB and who not really threatened by traffic accidents because they have a couple of outriders protecting them when they go out driving. Poverty is different. There are the statistics coming out, being churned out by various institutions, usually linked to the World Bank, which say that things are really improving. And there is the reality of people coming, for example, Gustavo Esteva, who lives in the slums in Mexico City, a former high UN employee, who says that the reality on the ground is much worse than what he sees from them as fast as it has for the rich. So there is a justice issue there, but surely things are getting better for them. And we have all these figures, and Vandana said you've got the wrong figures, you've got the wrong indicators since 20, 30 years, maybe even more. Because your indicators which just measure people's entry into the money economy, into the market economy, but they don't mention means and whether whether it actually means progress. Because I find quite often it means the modernization of their poverty. Quite often it means that people who are quite happy to drink water suddenly now think that if you're thirsty you must drink Coca-Cola. When I went to work in the Caribbean, I found that you have a farmer can afford is a shed with a corrugated iron roof in which the small children die of feet during the day. And you get these sort of experiences when you're going to the Philippines and being interested in spiritual healers, spiritual surgeons in the Philippines, and taking the taxi one day in Manila to Cebu. That hasn't really happened, because I think the human values are the same. They may be expressed differently, but they're not studied by the Institute for Global Ethics and other organizations. People like our Waterloo and Mandarin magazine from Chile, which shows that it opened doors. That sometimes we had real problems. We go to the capital and we try to go to the ministry to talk to the officials. But of course the doorman just looks at our clothing as poor farmers and he just shuts us out. We can't even get past the doorman. But after we got your award, the minister himself was standing in the door, waiting for us. So this is the kind of power shift which you can help engender. If you ask people in very, very different walks of life in very different countries. And you guys need to build on that and strengthen that. And one way we have done that is, through the awards. But even that, hasn't been enough. I have the feeling that we need to create an ongoing institution, which is this World Future Council initiative, like the global community. I go to these meetings with the World Bank, see all these northern NGOs, they're meeting all the time with the World Bank, but there was no platform for me to meet. Me as a Democratic member of Parliament. We're trying to sort of fix that by helping these MPs setting up an electronic network, this is called the e-Parliament Initiative, in the first instance, and provide all political credibility. And I think that is really the main problem today. You have this increasing distrust and lack of credibility because the gap between what people are doing and what people are saying is becoming so vast. And you see this among young people who are increasingly a largely negative challenge. But if you look at a country like Bangladesh, for example, you have a whole generation of young men, and I'm sure it's not like that, who've been told that the future is business. So, they've gone to that it doesn't seem to stand any chance of doing that. Some friends of mine now from Austria and Germany have developed the concept of an ecological Marshall Plan. We need an ecological Marshall Plan to help the poor. We need to instigate a market economy. Because if we continue with this neoliberal market economy, we're going to face increasing collapse of our societies, of the environment, increasing terror, etc. And I said, yes, you're quite right, but who is going to do this? Didn't get anywhere. So I think we know what needs to be done, but we don't really have clear strategies to get from here to there. And if you say, well, what on earth is the World Future Council to do with this? Well, all I say, they have set up strong institutions with strong powers, the IMF, the WTO, etc., to run their show. And if they tell us all the time, we don't need new institutions, we should think why maybe that is. And, go in and try to work through their institution, you pretty much find that they have institutions representing us in our much broader perspective as citizens, as world citizens. Then I think, that is not the end of it, but it'll be a very powerful shift. Humor, that it's not the question of creating some new ethics out of nowhere, where it's supposed to come from. We have this, we are all citizens, and we've always been citizens, and consumers have just been a small part of that. And now people disease in Africa, because it is, every one of us has a daily choice to be part of the problem, part of the which we can attack. But first of all, we need to formulate our alternatives in an ongoing way. We can't just have a commission or a meeting or some conference somewhere which produces a nice declaration which ends up on our bookshelves. And we have to see that now is a unique opportunity. Because as late as the Johannesburg summit in 2002, the elites of the South, who, as I said before, in many ways, the agents of the North, but they still have must have some kind of responsibility for their people in the South, because they know otherwise they could check them out if they took too bad. They were basically accepting and supporting, promoting the Northern agenda of further global trade liberalization. Without exception. And then suddenly, and good, they said no. They said no because they were suddenly fed up with how little they were getting. They were getting afraid of their people. They were getting afraid of NGO networks like the Third World Network, whose pressure, and it was a focus for the Global South, with our award recipient, Walter Fellow. Without these people, this would not have happened. But the Southern government suddenly changed sides and said no more. So they know what they are against, that this sort of formative alliance of the Southern governments and the NGOs, formed to say no. But it hasn't yet formed on what to say yes to. And that, I think, is a huge weakness. It's a huge weakness that even the big movements have not developed this. I mean, when you hear a lot of talks in many years of Buddhist economics, it was a term which even E.F. Schumacher, who wrote about Small is Beautiful, brought to the West. And we have some idea what it means in the detail, but what it actually mean in practice on the national level, I'd like to know. I mean, if tomorrow those who are talking about Buddhist economics are in power, what will they do differently? I don't know. I asked the same thing about Islamic economics. What is the answer of moderate Islam to the global crisis? When President Wahid, a moderate, really deep Islamic thinker, suddenly became president of the largest Islamic country on earth, and I said to his Minister of Technology, now what is Islamic economics? What are you going to do? And he said, I don't really believe in that, Islamic banking, it's not really working very well. We're going to call in the IMF. Now, of course, as moderates like that, it's not surprising that the extremists are getting more and more adherents. And I think that is, where our key work is now, and where each one of us can make a difference. I mean, we never know. I mean, I've learned this through my work. We never know when we're called upon to do something which can change the world. It can be a conversation we have, like happened to a little-known American poet called Gary Snyder years ago, when the Vietnam War stopped. Why did the Vietnam War stop? Because the American government could no longer withstand the anger of the American people when they found out the secrets in the so-called Pentagon Papers, which had been hidden from them, about what the USA was doing in Vietnam. And how did they find out these secrets? Because one mid-level bureaucrat called Daniel Ellsberg decided at the risk of 30 years in jail and ruin and everything to leak these papers to the New York Times. What suddenly made him do it? Well, he was in Tokyo about a year previously, and he went into the hotel bar at night, and this poet, Gary Snyder, had been doing a poetry reading in Tokyo, and staying in the same area, and you happened to walk into the same bar and looked around and you saw this other American sitting there and they got talking. And Ellsberg said to Snyder, what do you think about the war? And Snyder said, I think it's a criminal atrocity. And Ellsberg was quite shocked. He never actually met anybody with those opinions before. You know, he lived in a very secluded environment. And they talked all night. And then, you know, Snyder went home and Ellsberg went home, and a year later, it took him a year to go think through all the implications. Ellsberg sent a note to Gary Snyder saying, you know, I'm the man you spoke to in the bar in Tokyo a year ago. That conversation changed my life. Watch the newspapers. And next day you release the papers to the New York Times. So, you know, it matters what you do. It matters who you talk to, even in a bar at night. I think I'll stop there and we're looking for questions.
It's challenging, not totally negative, because I mean, as you say, as human being, I mean, only trust the leaders and think that things will happen up there is maybe not enough. I mean, all of us can make a change. But I think this is an opportunity. I don't know which role you have in the World Future Council. I mean, can we raise issues for you to bring into the council? And maybe we can also raise questions about, I mean, what is on the agenda now in the near future? Jakob.
I had the idea of the World Future Council, but, you know, based on similar ideas which had come out of the books and writings and speeches of Gorbachev and of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Václav Havel, etc., over the past 15 years. But nobody actually done anything about it. And I proposed it in a radio talk I did in Germany. And I then got a call from German television and said, we like this so much, if you can bring this about, we guarantee we'll televise it, you know, worldwide. And I thought, that's really quite amazing. Normally you work very hard to get something going, and you think, how can I get television interested? And here they come and they say they're actually waiting. So I said, look, I'm already responsible for one underfunded international initiative, namely the Right Louder Award, so there's no way I could possibly take this on. So they even introduced me to our first ideas would be taken up. Well, we looked at, when I say we, this has been sort of a small group of volunteers really working on this. Louis Barber is the director of Earth Action, this network I mentioned to you before. We had a meeting in Salzburg at the invitation of the governor there with about 30 people. Tariq Banouri, who runs the Stockholm Environment office, Stockholm Environment Institute office in Boston at the moment, but is originally from Pakistan. He is one who actually said this should not just be a council of wise elders, it should be a council of wise elders, pioneers and youth leaders. So he's been involved. There have been a number of people from advising us and endorsing this idea. Chandra Musaffar, Sulek Sivaraksa has agreed to be on the initial board. We're now going to have asking about 10 or 12 of the endorsers, who include Nobel Peace Prize laureates and people on both sides of the spectrum, and people in NGOs, people very, very fighting in the campaign against the World Bank, but also interesting privately. The president of the World Bank also totally thinks it's a good idea. So it's an interesting breadth of spectrum. And of course, you know, the devil is in the detail, as the Germans say. You know, we'll find out what actually happens once the debates get going. It depends very much on the people you win to conduct them, to steer the debates. We've found that there are about 20 issues. We can obviously subdivide them further, which need global reform, beginning with good work for all, water, healthy food for all, looking at health and healing, looking at nuclear disarmament, children's rights, various key environmental issues, justice, education for all. And it is quite clear that one problem at the moment is that these issues are dealt with in isolation. That when there's a problem, a commission is commissioned to come up with a report which will then say we need to lower the retirement age in the West because youth unemployment is getting so serious, so we need to have a lower retirement age. And then of course you have another commission which says we need to raise the retirement age because we can't afford to pay the pensions. And you have a commission which says it's really a worry for the global environment that the Chinese are consuming, are buying so many new cars. But another one says it's really a worry for the global economy that the Japanese are not buying so many new cars anymore. And, you know, it goes on and on and on. And so, for the first time we said we will have all these issues under one umbrella. which means that we can link them. We can start saying, for example, why are all these energy-saving proposals which go under headings like factor 4 or factor 10, that you can have so much energy efficiency that you can have the same amount of well-being, but just use 1/10 of the energy. And I said to the authors of one of these books, well, I mean, entrepreneurs are not stupid. If there are all these niches, all these profits to be made, why is it happening? And said, well, of course it needs financial reform, tax reform, reform of discounting regulations. The signals are wrong, which are being sent at the moment, so it can't be done within the present framework. But that's sort of like, that's not his responsibility. He's not an expert on this. So we said we need a framework where we can then have joint meetings with those who are experts in this, so we can come up with practical, actionable proposals, really with model legislation. And so at the moment, the wait is really for the funding which will enable the launch to take place. I think at the moment we're getting the kind of funding which in the next few months will enable us to start employing some key staff, including maybe a professional fundraiser. But I'm hoping within a year or so or less we'll have the kind of funding which will enable us to set up a launching conference, or even I prefer the word launching tribunal, because we really need to sit in judgment about what has to be done with our Earth, and then see which of these commissions there is enough energy for to get them going. I don't think that we want a huge organization with a huge secretariat running 20, or at the moment the list has 24 commissions. You'll find them all on World Future Council, all in one word, .org. I think that we need, ideally have like some host organizations, maybe host cities, but even better, credible host organizations to say, okay, we will be responsible for the Commission on Good Work for All. And also looking for chairs for these commissions. There's a German professor, Richard Bergman, who's worked both in South Africa and in the US, so really has global experience on unemployment issues. I shared a platform with him and His Holiness the Dalai Lama at the German Church Days last year, talking about this. We had 20,000, mostly young people there. So there is a lot of interest. We are doing a sort of summary at the moment, what we call a World Future Report, where we are now looking for authors to just do a very short summary on each of these 24 issues, saying where are we at the moment, where are we heading to, and where could we be headed to, and what are the practical steps to go there. And then we'll find that in some areas there's something we can get a majority on tomorrow. Much of the transition to a sustainable energy culture is basically, the information is there. We can mobilize public opinion around that. People want it, north and south. They realize that all the solar energy of yesterday, which we didn't use, was wasted forever. So to have a situation where you compare the extraction cost of solar energy, of renewable energy, with non-renewables, when actually they are totally opposite. With non-renewable, as you know, it's the one you used yesterday, which is gone forever. With a renewable, it's the energy you didn't use yesterday, which is gone forever. So obviously we need to shift the way we calculate our energy use. And that you can get a majority for tomorrow. Just needs a concerted campaign for a World Energy Charter, for example. Hermann Scheer has been working on this. We could mobilize for that as soon as we can get the council going. Other issues like monetary reform are considerably more complex. You need much more education, much more research on that. So, it won't all happen in parallel, but I think enough will happen, quickly enough, and people realize that there is a body which is actually not just a talking shop, of course there are the parliamentarians linked to it, which is not just going to end up, producing a nice report, but which is part of a concerted process, not another competitive organization. I said everybody is welcome. We are looking for institutional partners, and we've had a couple of institutions who are founding partners for this. It is not a competition. It's not another NGO. It's a process to bridge the implementation gap.
So, I'm looking for hands, and if you have a hand, you can say your name and if you represent any organization, if you want. Oh, guys. Okay.
My name is Guy Horton. I work on mainly on the issue of Burma. And while I totally agree with almost everything you say and feel a deep sympathy for it, I have two questions in my mind as I was listening to you. And one is this issue of peace. And to ask you, really, what do you think about Rwanda's, about Sarajevo's, about Burma, which is very close to us here? when you have a situation where peace does not seem to work in any way whatsoever, and this is dramatically illustrated by the situation in Aung San Suu Kyi's ambush last year. And she's a Nobel Peace Prize winner, she won the election, her safety being guaranteed by the regime, by the UN envoy. She was very careful to make sure her followers did nothing provocative, and when the cars were stopped and surrounded, she asked her people not to resist, and they were simply cut down. And if you think of Rwanda, 800,000 people were killed there, and various other places. So one of the things I wrestle with in trying to find a way of responding to what's happening in Burma is the natural allies like yourself or people like here. I'm not sure how they can think about responding to a regime like this. And while I accept that huge numbers of people are being killed indirectly, lack of clean water, malaria and all the rest of it, on occasions huge numbers of people are deliberately, actively killed by these regimes, directly. And the West European pacifist, left-of-centre movement is not very good at responding to that. Maybe we don't know how to respond to it, but it is a fact. And the second thing is the uneasiness in my mind sometimes about the globalization issue. Because some of the leading anti-globalization politicians in the 20th century were people like Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Hitler. They were all deeply committed to fighting and ridding themselves from being enmeshed in some kind of international capitalism. And I don't know if this is true or not, but one of the reasons maybe why the Pakistani-Indian War did not occur a couple of years ago was massive pressure from people like Microsoft saying that they might withdraw from India if a nuclear war took place. Now, I'm only being slightly devil's advocate here, but what I'm trying to do is just to share some concerns in mind about the issue of peace when confronted with diabolical violence and deceit. And sometimes maybe those people who are anti-globalization may be associated with nationalism that actually can create more violence. Do you see what I mean? I do deeply respect what you say, and I believe what you say, but it almost seems to me that you're coming from a sane, rational, humane world. And sometimes, those assumptions don't apply in Rwanda or Sarajevo or modern Burma.
When I was young, my father took me to the trial of one of the main Nazi butchers of the Jewish ghetto in Warsaw. And I'd read so many reports of these trials, and they were sort of saying that these men were not, they were nice old grandfathers, and why put them on trial again? And I know when I entered that courtroom, I was sort of worried that this man would look like a nice old grandfather. I'd find difficult to feel any antipathy to him. And he looked up, and evil just shone out of his face. I'm convinced that, there is evil. And there are smaller or larger opportunities for evil. And of course what happened in these cases was that people who were disposed to evil and who might have become neighborhood thugs suddenly had the opportunity to become mass murderers. And my father was a refugee from Nazism, and I wrestled a lot with the situation in Bosnia, where suddenly it seemed that we had fascism in Europe again. But what is the right thing to do? And I finally decided that I was not a pacifist, and that intervention, there was an international order built up the United Nations, and if a country is a member of the United Nations and is aggressed, like Bosnia was, it has a right to expect to be defended by the global community. And I went back to my native Sweden, and together with the actress Bibi Andersson, we set up a new political party called the Sarajevo List to fight purely on that issue. And at the same time, when the Iraq preparations for the Iraq war began, I felt instinctively that it was totally wrong. It was not just a breach of the UN Charter, it was basically breaching the whole international order of the last 350 years without replacing it. But at the same time, I also have friends who worked on human rights there. I know the oppression, and it was always the struggle what to do. And I was helped by the statement of Viktor Frankl, a Jewish Austrian philosopher who survived the Holocaust, who said that sometimes the right thing to do is only 55% right, but you still have to act on these 55%. And I think that's, you know, very, very true. And so every issue, I think, is basically has to be looked at on its own merit. So there's no parallel really between, to me, you know, Bosnia and Burma and Rwanda. So once you start looking at the details, and what happened in Bosnia was a clear aggression, which because the European Union couldn't get it back together, it tried to pretend was a civil war, and it's still suffering the consequences of creating the kind of apartheid, while the aggressors, i.e. not these Serbs, because we gave the right louder award to those Serbs in Bosnia who were working with the Bosnian government to preserve the multi-ethnic, multicultural Bosnia, the Serb Council of Sarajevo. But the Serb aggressors, the thugs, the terrorists, funded by Milosevic, they were given half the country. So I think that is a major mistake, and that's the reason why we are having the situation now with the ethnic splits now. What happened in Rwanda was quite clearly that, you know, one major power, namely France, conducted a policy there which was absolutely outrageous and prevented the UN, and the others didn't really intervene. France's role was the worst, but even the others didn't intervene. I mean, there was a UN general there who had a warning, clear intelligence what's going to happen, and he called for reinforcements, and he was not given them, and he's even told not to interfere. He offered to raid the secret arms dumps, and he was told not to do it. And, you know, he afterwards he became mentally sick because of, you know, what he felt he could have prevented if he, you know, wondered whether he should have just ignored the orders and just gone ahead and do it. And what's going on in Burma, I mean, reminds us again that although people like to think that the EU, you know, Europe is a bit better than the USA, in this case, I mean, in the Burma case, the EU position has to be scandalous because, I mean, there are these, you know, selective purchasing laws passed, for example, by the state of Massachusetts, banning state orders for any company, any U.S. company, which, or any company, U.S. or not, which does business with Burma, with the Kuta. And the EU has been suing the U.S., you know, Massachusetts via the U.S. and through the World Trade Organization, trying to get this law declared to be discriminatory impediment to trade. So I think again there, you know, no nation can really resist the total international boycott of its elites. But of course the Burmese rulers are not being boycotted or isolated. And there's even less excuse in many other countries where, you know, the alternative to the strongmen seems to be chaos. Because in Burma it's not chaos, it's all there. I mean, the elected leader is there. And so it's even more outrageous that the West, which claims to be interested in democracy, is not doing anything. And I think, again, the problem is that, you know, we are saying this here and we're saying this there, but I think we need to create a stronger ongoing voice which says this, who speaks up for our values as citizens. And that, of course, used to be the role of the churches or religious leaders. But as we know, they don't really dare to do this. And when they do it so weakly because they're afraid that if they do it more strongly and they aren't taken seriously, then it will just show how weak they are. And I mean, I was talking last year at a meeting organized of mainly of Christian leaders from all the three main Christian traditions, organized by the Patriarch of Constantinople, meeting of scientists, religious leaders, and environmental leaders. And I said, you know, we need stronger leadership from, you know, if the churches are there, surely they must care about the planet, about creation, surely this is our role. What about excommunicating a few of the worst sinners and polluters? And there was kind of horrified silence. And finally one English bishop, old English bishop, stood up and said, no, the churches can only lead from behind. I said, what are you waiting for? He said, well, the only thing which can wake people up is a disaster in the rich countries. So I said, you know, what are you thinking about? He said, well, like the flooding of London. I said, well, it's quite remarkable that here you have old English bishops going around hoping that London will be flooded in order to wake the believers up. And you have this, I mean, I spoke in Switzerland, one of these, you know, the churches are now setting up these centers for management training. But you go there and you find that actually the managers you meet there, the people from industry, from business, I mean, they are more open than these guys are who are running the show. I mean, this leader of the center was saying, well, of course, you know, there was 3 ways of persuading people, and one is the moral way. But so that doesn't work anymore. Moral institutions have collapsed. You know? And the state, of course, used to pass laws, and that doesn't work anymore because people don't like rules. So then it's just the way, you know, business does it, was sort of, you know, trying to attract people through, you know, as consumers. That's the only way. We somehow have to sort of formulate our message so that it becomes attractive to people as consumers. And I said, well, you know, I thought I was at a meeting organized by a church institution, not by the advertising industry. So there is this bankruptcy of these existing institutions, and of course as a result of which people become very, very cynical about them. And so we need to recreate institutions which speaks up for us as citizens, because our elected governments are more or less in the pockets of consumer interests, and they will always look at the bottom line, and so all the time you will have been told, well, yes, we do appreciate your concern as a human rights activist, and you have brought us 5 million signatures now saying that we should really take stronger measures against the Burmese generals. But you must understand that yesterday we were visited by 5 businessmen who are responsible for creating 5,000 new jobs, and these jobs will be lost if we don't allow them to trade with Burma. And so we need a stronger international institution that basically says, look, this is totally irrelevant whether there are 5,000 jobs or not. There are more important things than jobs. There are more important things than making money. And if you don't do that, we are going to keep on denouncing and exposing you every day and make you into a moral pariah. And this is a method which no elected politician can resist. I mean, Lyndon Johnson resigned because if every day he left the White House, he would hear the chant of LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? I mean, nobody can stand this for very long. Leaders from the private sector, when I say to them, well, what made you change? And they come and they are really sort of seeking. And they said, well, I was tired of my children telling me at dinner every night that I was destroying that planet and that future. So I think this is why we need to speak up and say it's outrageous. I mean, I speak to, I don't know how many different audiences. I always give this example. I say, now, if you lend a poor African, say a poor Burmese, $1,000, and he or she came back after a couple of years and repaid you $1,000, would you pursue him or her for compound interest on this money for year after year, even if you knew that money, the compound interest you were forcing them to pay you, was endangering the health and education of their children? Of course, nobody says, yes, I will do that. But that's being done every day by our governments, by our international institutions, by our banks in our name. And, if you look into the animal kingdom, which especially young people, care about, that's where we now have these terrorist organizations in Europe who care more about animals than about people, who are prepared to endanger people's lives to save animals. But they have just been so horrified by living in a Europe where this horses, cows, pigs, sheep, 25 million, 10% are dead on arrival. The half-dead rest is uneaten by us, those who eat meat. But it still pays. The system still pays. But of course, morally, ethically, and not just, these are not European values, they are not Asian values, they are human values. It's totally outrageous. But it needs to be spoken, daily with a stronger voice. The voice of commercial speech, which isn't just the advertisements we hear. It's these, business leaders sitting there, seeing our politicians every day, going to have dinner with them and saying, do you realize what this means, if you introduce this boycott, let the market, the market will somehow, look what happened in South Africa, sooner or later, we were able to, and then of course others say, no, it was without you as much. Sure, it was the boycott which stopped South Africa out of the apartheid system. It wasn't the companies who stayed there. And they might very well have provided slightly different terms than others. But it was the whole system. It was feeling that they were an international pariah, which made.
Maybe it could be a microphone. Can you speak up?
My name is Eddie. I'm just an observer. I'd like to ask 2 questions. In the first part of the speech, we have highlighted the ideas of the Green Party or the Radical Party. How much members are in the European Union of this Green Party and Radical Party in view of the fact that the election in France and Germany almost wipe out many of the Green Party? So how can you justify your party? That's the one question. And the second question is, now after Cancun, it seems that the World Trade Organization has collapsed or not because of Brazil and India and so forth. So what is the likelihood of the scenario for the World Trade Organization? And does the northern countries, does they admit that this because of globalization and because of the unfairness that the third world countries are suffering. Thank you.
I think what happened in national politics in Europe, and I mean the German Green Party at the moment is doing very well in the opinion polls because many people are so disillusioned with the Social Democrats, and Joschka Fischer is a very sort of charismatic politician, although I have very strong disagreements with him. But in other countries they have become so weak, as you say, and also the electoral system is such that they have managed to stay such a small party that they have made alliances. And in France now they allot themselves the Social Democrats. They have done that in a couple of other countries too, and they actually did quite well in that alliance, which will then guarantee them a couple of seats. But in the new East European countries, they are basically disappeared. I mean, they exist. They are. How big are they? Well, some may have a few hundred, some may have a few thousand members. There's a European Green Coordination, which which meets. So they're basically there is a Green Party in every country, but in very few of these countries are they in parliament. I mean, even fewer are they in government, and that was during the 90s. There were more of them. When the Soviet system collapsed, there was a time when you couldn't really declare that you were a liberal or conservative, but you could declare that you were a green. So suddenly there were these masses of greens in Eastern Europe, but then when the politics changed, it turned out that they were not really greens at all. This was just a sort of political opportunity thing. But in most countries, the system is still such that small parties are discriminated against. And the problem is that, to me, that the Green Party has remained a minority party because it did not highlight the issue. It had an issue which is the most important issue, I think, for our survival, but it sort of joined the existing streams and positioned itself somewhere inside the existing left-right spectrum, and found this niche, which is a niche where you sometimes get 3%, sometimes you get 7 or 10%. But I remember a friend of mine who was now also actually left and pushed out of the Green Party. He was in mainstream about 10 years ago. He was one of the kind of wrote the program, former member of the European Parliament and a candidate in Paris, and the suburb of Munich, so no fundamentalist by any means. But he always used to say, when the Greens were really 7%, and they said, oh, this really will end up with 60%. He used to say, when you look around the world, then anything less than 51% is the Greens like not an issue. And this was growth. It turned out that it was right. And that's, of course, one of the most successful propaganda lies of the established order, because the limits to growth report was basically true. It's just, I mean, they didn't get everything completely right. They underestimated the oil reserves probably by a few decades, So they'll run out 20 or 30 years later, but it doesn't really matter because we live off cheap oil, not of oil, but cheap oil. And the maximum oil reserves in the world will have been reached in a couple of years' time. And after that, when people realize that psychologically, of course the oil, the countries with large reserves will then really realize they have something very valuable, which also the chemical industry wants, so they will hold back, they can increase the price, they have an enormous monopoly power, which is of course why the US looked around and saw that there were 3 countries with big reserves left. One of them they have now occupied. Second one, Saudi Arabia, they still have a strong influence in. And the third one, Venezuela, they tried to overthrow the democratically elected president once, and I'm sure they'll try again. So this is the situation, but there are other areas like soil erosion, for example, where what has happened since the Club of Rome report came out is actually much worse than they predicted. And it's interesting that, when you actually look at all these alternative quality of life indicators, alternatives to GDP economic growth indicators, they all begin to diverge around the time the Club of Rome report came out. So, until then, quality of life and GDP had about grown at the same speed. But since then, you find that quality of life stagnates or is going down, while GDP growth will continue. Why is that? That is because more and more of expenses, what is counted as GDP growth, are defensive expenditures to deal with the consequences of the limits to growth. And economic globalization is, as our award recipient Professor Herman Daly put it, a last attempt by some countries to exclude natural limits to economic growth by growing into the economic and environmental space of other countries. And that is basically what in private car traffic of 95% within a few months. It can be done. There's no doubt about it. Once the will has been voted.
ผู้ปกครองและลูกสามีภรรยาในเวลาในทางตอนออกภรรยาผู้หญิงเนี่ยอยู่ถูกเป็นฝ่ายด้อยฝ่ายตกฝ่ายที่ถูกกดเอาไว้ในขณะที่ตะวันตกเนี่ยผู้หญิงเนี่ยก็ก้าวล้ำหน้าก้าวล้ำหน้าผู้ชายไปก็ได้ยังไงที่เกิดมีความสมดุลอันนี้เป็นประเด็นที่น่าทำให้เกิดขึ้นระหว่างสามีภรรยาความสมดุลและเป็นคู่ชีวิตที่มีบทบาทสมรายระหว่างลูกกับพ่อแม่นี่ก็เป็นประเด็นสำคัญซึ่งเป็นปัญหาในตัวตกทำไงที่มีความสมดุลระหว่างที่ไม่ใช่แบบตะวันออกคือพ่อแม่ต้องเป็นควบคุมลูกแล้วก็ไม่ใช่แบบตะวันตกที่ลูกเนี่ยเป็นอิสระโดยสุดแปลกแยกนะทำยังไงที่จะเอาความสามารถของเด็กของเยาวชนเนี่ยเข้ามาพัฒนาเพื่อให้เกิดพลังในทางสันติภาพอันนี้ต้องอาศัยระบบการศึกษาที่เข้ามาช่วยนะหลักสูตรในโรงเรียนและมหาวิทยาลัยเนี่ยหรือว่าหลักสูตรทางด้านสันติภาพจะเป็นสิ่งที่สำคัญที่ช่วยทำให้เกิดความประสานคนเกิดดึงศักยภาพของเด็กออกมาและเกิดความสัมพันธ์ที่สมดุลระหว่างเด็กกับผู้ใหญ่มิติที่3หรือวงกลมวงที่3เนี่ยที่กว้างขึ้นมาทีก็คือเรื่องของสังคมซึ่งเวลานี้เนี่ยมันมีกลุ่มศาสนากลุ่มชั้นวรรณะหรือว่ากลุ่มทางด้านเชื้อชาติภาษาซึ่งต่างก็มีปฏิสัมพันธ์ต่อกันทำยังไงนะซึ่ง2กลุ่มนี้เนี่ยปัจจุบันเนี่ยอาจจะนำความเห็นที่แตกต่างกันหรือว่าความแตกต่างกันทางด้านความคิดเนี่ยก็อาจจะนำไปสู่ความขัดแย้งขึ้นมาได้ทำยังไงที่จะมีกลไกที่จะแก้ไขความขัดแย้งระหว่างกลุ่มต่างๆในสังคมอันนี้เป็นประเด็นสำคัญสิ่งเหล่านี้เนี่ยจะต้องทำไปควบคู่ไปกับการที่จะทำให้เกิดระบบเศรษฐกิจที่เป็นธรรมเพราะปัจจุบันเนี่ยคน 10% เท่านั้นเองเนี่ยที่ครอบครองทรัพยากร 90% ของโลกซึ่งมันทำให้สันติภาพเกิดขึ้นไม่ได้นอกจากนั้นความเปลี่ยนแปลงทางด้านเทคโนโลยีก็ทำให้เกิดความเปลี่ยนแปลงทางด้านปฏิสัมพันธ์ของคนในสังคมหมู่บ้านเล็กๆอย่างที่เราเคยเห็นนี่มันหาได้ยากไปทุกทีนะมันก็จะเกิดอุตสาหกรรมและที่ตามมาอุตสาหกรรมคือแหล่งเสริมโทรมตลอดจนความขัดแย้งและความตึงเครียดปัญหาเรื่องยาเสพติดปัญหาเรื่องความรุนแรงปัญหาเรื่องอิทธิพลใต้ดินเหล่านี้เนี่ยมันล้วนแต่ทำให้เกิดความขัดแย้งขึ้นมาในสังคมทำยังไงถึงจะถ้าหากว่าไม่มีการแก้ไขความยากจนและการแก้ไขความขัดแย้งเหล่านี้ในระดับสังคมแล้วเนี่ยแม้แต่ประเทศที่ร่ำรวยก็คงจะหนีไม่พ้นความวุ่นวายนะหรือว่าความขัดแย้งมิติที่4กว้างไปหน่อยก็คือชาตินะชาติเนี่ยแม้ว่าในโลกโลกาภิวัตน์เนี่ยชาตินี่ก็จะมีบทบาทน้อยลงแต่เราคงปฏิเสธไม่ได้ว่าชาตินี่ยังเป็นองค์กรเป็นระเบียบสังคมที่ใหญ่ที่สุดที่มีพลังที่สุดในปัจจุบันนะแล้วก็แม้ว่าชาติเนี่ยจะนำความเปลี่ยนแปลงและความเจริญก็นำมาสู่มนุษยชาติแต่ในขณะเดียวกันมันก็ก่อให้เกิดความขัดแย้งจนเกิดการรบกวนการทำสงครามขึ้นอย่างไรก็ตามเนี่ยมันมีแนวโน้มที่เราเห็นได้ในปัจจุบันคือว่าในแง่นึงเนี่ยมันมีการรวมกลุ่มกันระหว่างชาติการไม่ให้ความสำคัญกับอธิปไตยระหว่างชาติอย่างเช่นตลาดร่วมยุโรปอย่างเช่น EU ประชาคมยุโรปเนี่ยเป็นการรวมกลุ่มระหว่างชาติโดยที่ข้ามพ้นจากความเป็นชาตินะซึ่งเป็นเรื่องที่น่าแปลกใจเพราะว่าชาติในยุโรปเคยทำสงครามรบพุ่งกันมาแล้วปัจจุบันสามารถที่จะรวมกันได้แล้วก็พยายามที่จะไม่ให้ความสำคัญกับอธิปไตยของชาตินี่คือแนวโน้มด้านแต่แนวโน้มด้านคือการแตกกระจายการเสื่อมสลายของชาติต่างๆเช่นอดีตสหภาพยุโรปแล้วก็ยูโกสลาเวียแตกแยกออกไปเป็นกลุ่มเล็กกลุ่มน้อยตามเชื้อชาติแล้วก็มารบพุ่งกันหรือเป็นปฏิปักษ์ต่อกันนี่เป็นแนวโน้มอีกด้านหนึ่งที่เห็นได้ในโลกปัจจุบันก็คือว่าในด้านหนึ่งเนี่ยการที่เป็นเน้นเรื่องความเป็นชาติมากนะหรื อีกด้านหนึ่งการที่จะไปพ้นจากความเป็นชาติสิ่งนี้คือปรากฏการณ์ในโลกยุคศตวรรษที่11ทำยังไงถึงจะทำให้พลังของชาตินิยมนี้มันไม่เป็นปัจจัยแห่งความขัดแย้งและความรุนแรงการจำเป็นต้องมีโครงสร้างหรือกรอบโกงระดับใหญ่เช่นอย่างที่ประชาคมยุโรปทำอย่างที่อาเซียนกำลังทำเนี่ยอันนี้ก็เป็นทางออกทางหนึ่งในการที่จะทำให้ความเป็นชาติมันไม่เป็นตัวการของความขัดแย้งได้และแน่นอนจะเป็นต้องมีกลไกเพื่อที่ทำให้เกิดความแก้ปัญหาความขัดแย้งระหว่างชาตินะประการต่อมาซึ่งเป็นมิติที่5แล้วก็เป็นวงกลมที่อยู่ครอบทุกวงก็คือว่าการสร้างสันติภาพในระดับโลกตรงนี้เป็นประเด็นสำคัญซึ่งบทบาทของขบวนการระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยจะมีบทบาทมากนะแล้วดร.ซีก็ได้พูดถึงพัฒนาการของขบวนการเสวนาวิสาสะระหว่างศาสนาที่ได้เกิดขึ้นมาเริ่มแต่เมื่อ100 ปีที่แล้วมีการประชุมกันระดับโลกที่ชิคาโกเมื่อปี 2436 เริ่มมาจนถึงปี 2536 ก็มีการจัดอีกครั้งหนึ่งแล้วก็ยังมีการจัดเรื่อยไปกระบวนการที่มุ่งไปที่วิสาสะหรือการเสวนาระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยมันเป็นสิ่งซึ่งจำเป็นมากในปัจจุบันโดยเฉพาะปัจจุบันเนี่ยมันมีแนวทางในการที่จะลดความคลั่งไคล้หรือความคับแคบในทางศาสนาหรือการผูกขาดว่าศาสนาของตัวเองความเชื่อของตัวเองที่ถูกเนี่ยมันก็เกิดขึ้นและมีบทบาทมากทำไงเราถึงจะมีแนวทางทางศาสนาที่ไปพ้นจากความคับแคบเหล่านั้นก็เป็นแนวทางศาสนาที่เชื่อมประสานมนุษย์ให้เป็นหนึ่งเดียวกันแทนที่จะขัดแย้งกันหรือว่าต่างอ้างความเป็นอ้างความถูกต้องสิ่งเหล่านี้กระบวนการเสวนาวิสาสะระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยตอนนี้ยังเพิ่งก่อตัวดร.ซิงยังปรารถนาที่จะเห็นกระบวนการนี้ขยายใหญ่นะเหมือนอย่างที่กระบวนการสิ่งแวดล้อมเนี่ยได้พัฒนามาจากจุดเล็กๆจุดที่เราเป็นชายขอบจนกระทั่งมาถึงเป็นกระแสหลักได้กระบวนการเสวนาวิสาสะระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยหรือความร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยน่าจะพัฒนาเป็นจุดนั้นได้เหมือนกันแต่ว่าปัญหาคือตอนนี้เนี่ยยังไม่มีใครเป็นเจ้าภาพยังไม่มีใครเป็นเจ้าภาพในกระบวนการด้านสิ่งแวดล้อมแต่ว่ามันเป็นสิ่งซึ่งควรจะต้องทำให้เกิดขึ้นเพราะมันเป็นปัจจัยสำคัญของการสร้างสันติภาพในระดับโลกคำถามที่เกิดขึ้นที่เราเป็นสิ่งได้ตั้งให้แก่พวกเราคือเวลานี้เรากำลังพัฒนาไปสู่สังคมโลกไม่ใช่สังคมประเทศแต่เป็นสังคมโลกปัญหาคือว่ามันมีทางสองแพร่งนะสังคมโลกนี้จะมาอาจจะทางแพร่งที่หนึ่งเป็นสังคมที่เต็มไปด้วยอาชญากรรมความเกลียดชังและความคับแคบคลั่งไคล้ในทางลัทธิความเชื่อหรือจะเป็นสังคมโลกที่เต็มไปด้วยความประสานสอดคล้องและก็ประสานและตั้งอยู่บนพื้นฐานความร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนานี่คือทางสองแพร่งซึ่งเราจะต้องเป็นคนตัดสินใจนะฮะว่าเราจะต้องการให้เกิดสังคมโลกที่เป็นไปในลักษณะใดดร.ซิงได้พูดถึงศรีอรพินโทซึ่งเป็นนักปรัชญาคนสำคัญคนหนึ่งของอินเดียยุคไล่ๆคาทีก็พูดว่าเนี่ยเวลานี้เนี่ยเราสิ่งสำคัญคือแนวคิดนะไม่ใช่แนวคิดที่เป็นในเรื่องของสิ่งศักดิ์สิทธิ์ที่อยู่เหนือโลกหรือแนวคิดที่ในเรื่องปัจจุบันหรือว่าโลกในชีวิตนี้เท่านั้นทางนั้นมันไม่พอนะสิ่งที่เราต้องการคือแนวคิดที่เชิดชูมนุษย์นะเห็นมนุษย์ว่าเป็นสิ่งที่มีค่าที่สามารถที่จะก่อให้เกิดพัฒนาการด้านในและสามารถที่มีบทบาทในการสร้างสังคมที่ดีงามและโลกที่เป็นสันติได้ด้วยเหตุนี้เองเนี่ยตรงนี้เนี่ยบทบาทศาสนาจะช่วยได้จำเป็นต้องมีความร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนาในระดับโลกนะซึ่งมีหลายมิติเพื่อที่จะทำให้บทบาทของมนุษย์ในด้านนี้ได้การพัฒนาชีวิตด้านในแล้วก็การมีบทบาทสร้างสรรค์ใน ตอนนี้เนี่ยสิ่งที่เราต้องตระหนักคือว่าปัจจุบันนี้มีการฆ่าการทำร้ายการรังควานการแม้กระทั่งการเผาคนทั้งเป็นในนามของศาสนาทั้งที่ทุกศาสนานี่ก็เน้นถึงความรักความเมตตาทุกศาสนามองมนุษย์เป็นหนึ่งเดียวกันทุกศาสนาตระหนักถึงทิฏฐิภาวะในมนุษย์ทุกคนแต่ทำไมถึงเกิดเหตุการณ์รุนแรงอย่างนี้ได้เราจะเป็นที่ต้องมีกระบวนการร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนาที่ทุกคนเนี่ยอาจจะเป็นอย่างที่ศาสนิกเนี่ยเราอาจจะหลีกเลี่ยงไม่ได้ที่เราอาจจะมองว่าศาสนาของเราเนี่ยเป็นศาสนาที่ดีกว่าศาสนาอื่นแต่นั่นไม่ใช่เป็นเหตุผลที่เราจะต้องมาทำร้ายคนที่นับถือศาสนาอื่นนะสิ่งที่เราต้องมีก็คือความใจกว้างยอมรับความหลากหลายความแตกต่างระหว่างศาสนาและยอมรับว่ามีเส้นทางที่จะนำไปสู่สันติภาวะได้ศาสนาต่างๆกันนะโดยที่ยอมรับทิฏฐิภาวะของมนุษย์ทุกคนถ้าหากว่าเราไม่สามารถที่จะสร้างความร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนาในระดับโลกที่มีความใจกว้างอย่างนี้ได้เนี่ยการที่โลกเนี่ยจะมีการที่มนุษย์จะอยู่ในโลกที่สันติที่ไม่บ้าคลั่งเนี่ยก็คงจะเป็นแค่ความฝันดร.ซิงห์ได้สรุปได้จบปาฐกถาด้วยบทหรือคาถาในคำพีพระเวทนะซึ่งได้สาธยายกันมานับพันปีแล้วนะก็คือว่าสันติจงมีแด่สวงสวรรค์และพื้นพิภพสันติจงแผ่ไปทั่วอวกาศสันติจงบังเกิดแก่น้ำและพืชพันธุ์ทั้งหลายสันติจงมีแด่เทวดาและพรหมสันติจงแผ่ไปทั่วสกลจักรวาลและสันติจงมีแด่ตัวข้าพเจ้าโอมสันติสันติสันตินี่ก็คือสรุปในย่อของปาฐกถาของพระฤาษีมาให้ในความเป็นส่วนตัวกันได้นะคือว่าคำพูดข้อสรุปการถามของดร.ซิงห์เนี่ยสำหรับคนไทยเราอาจจะถ้าคุ้นเคยกับอาจารย์พุทธทาสเนี่ยเราคงจะรู้สึกว่าใกล้เคียงกันอาจารย์พุทธทาสที่ท่านบอกว่าท่านมีปณิธาน3ประการก็คือว่าประการแรกคือการให้เราเนี่ยเข้าถึงแก่นแท้ของศาสนาของเราเองจะเป็นพุทธจะเป็นคริสต์อิสลามก็แล้วแต่สิ่งที่เราจำเป็นต้องทำคือเข้าถึงแก่นแท้ของศาสนาและประการที่2คือความร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนาและประการที่3ก็คือการพยายามที่ไปพ้นจากอำนาจของวัตถุนิยมตรงนี้เนี่ยสอดคล้องกับแนวคิดของดร.ซิงห์โดยเฉพาะในเรื่องของความร่วมมือกันระหว่างศาสนาดร.ซิงห์เห็นว่าศาสนาควรมีบทบาทอย่างน้อยใน2ระดับคือวงเล็กที่สุดเนี่ยคือในระดับจิตวิญญาณการที่เราได้เข้าถึงแก่นแท้ของศาสนาที่ตระหนักถึงทิฏฐิภาวะภายในก็จะทำให้เรามีชีวิตที่สันติให้เบียดเบียนใครและขณะเดียวกันดร.ซิงห์ในบทบาทของกระบวนการระหว่างศาสนาที่จะสร้างสันติภาพในระดับโลกคือวงกลมที่5ทั้งวงเล็กวงที่1แล้วก็วงที่5เนี่ยคือเป็นบทบาทที่ศาสนาจะเข้ามามีบทบาทได้ซึ่งว่าคิดว่าก็เป็นเรื่องที่สอดคล้องกับแนวคิดของท่านอาจารย์พุทธทาสที่ว่าศาสนาเนี่ยไม่ควรจะเพียงแค่เปลี่ยนแปลงตัวเราเองแต่ควรจะสามารถเปลี่ยนแปลงให้เกิดสันติในระดับสังคมในระดับโลกได้ในเพราะการที่เราเนี่ยสามารถที่จะไปพ้นจากอำนาจของวัตถุนิยมหรือบริโภคนิยมอันนี้แล้วก็แต่ว่าสิ่งที่ดร.ซิงห์ได้เน้นมากนี่ก็คือการพยายามร่วมมือกันระหว่างศาสนาให้เป็นกระบวนการระดับโลกนี่เป็นสิ่งที่เราที่น่าสนใจด้วยกระบวนการระดับโลกนะซึ่งทำให้ศาสนาเนี่ยเป็นกระแสหลักของสังคมนะแล้วก็แต่แน่นอนจะทำอย่างนั้นได้ในศาสนาต้องสามารถจะทำให้เกิดการเปลี่ยนแปลงภายในเราเสียก่อนอันนี้ก็เป็นสิ่งที่เราคิดว่าน่าสนใจแต่ แต่ปัญหาคือว่าทำอย่างไรแต่เป็นคำถามเพื่อสิ่งคือทำอย่างไรถึงจะให้กระบวนการระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยมันมีบทบาทที่โดดเด่นกว่ากระบวนการที่เราเรียกว่า fundamentalism เราคงทราบในกระบวนการ fundamentalism หรือว่ากระบวนการที่เคร่งจารีตซึ่งตอนนี้เนี่ยมีบทบาทมากในวงการเมืองระดับประเทศแล้วก็ระดับโลกในทุกประเทศมีความขัดแย้งกันระหว่างศาสนาส่วนก็เพราะว่ากระบวนการ fundamentalism อย่างเช่นในอินเดีย fundamentalism ฝ่ายฮินดูกับฝ่ายมุสลิมก็ทะเลาะกันทำลายกันบิลลาเดนตาลิบันก็เป็นส่วนของกระบวนการ fundamentalism ทางศาสนาที่ก่อให้เกิดความขัดแย้งจนกระทั่งคนที่มองภาพพุทธศาสนาอิสลามมาเป็นศาสนาแห่งความรุนแรงนะหรือว่ามองภาพมีภาพพจน์กับศาสนาทั้งหมดว่าเป็นอย่างนี้เองทำยังไงกระบวนการร่วมมือระหว่างศาสนาเนี่ยจะสามารถที่จะกอบกู้ภาพพจน์ของศาสนาขึ้นมาให้ได้ว่าไม่ใช่นำไปสู่ความขัดแย้งไม่นำไปสู่ความรุนแรงอย่างที่กระบวนการfundamentalismพยายามสร้างภาพอย่างนี้ขึ้นมาอันนี้เป็นประเด็นซึ่งอยากจะถามว่าสิ่งI would like to ask one question. How interfaith movement can create a better image of religion, which is now almost hijacked by the fundamentalist movement. People, the secular, the lay people around the world now perceive religion as a fanatic, as those who have narrow-minded and prefer to use violence. This is the image of religion in around the world. How the faith movement, as you promote, can save religion from this fundamentalist and fanatic movement?
Yes, thank you, Vikshiji. In fact, this is the great tragedy that religion, which is based upon love and compassion, has been hijacked, as you rightly say. And this is bringing a bad name to religion as such. For example, the Islamic fundamentalists, the jihadis, they represent a very tiny fraction of Muslims, but today around the world, the Muslim religion has become demonized because they have brought the whole of the Muslim religion into disrepute. The same has not happened to that extent. Luckily, we have our fundamentalists in Hinduism also and in Sikhism also. But they have not yet been able to create too bad an image. But you are quite right. Unless the interfaith movement actually begins to tell the people that this is not the true essence of religion. That the essence of religion, as the Buddha preached, as Mahavira preached, as the Vedas preached, is love and understanding and compassion. We will not be able to overcome the fundamentalists. That is why I said, unfortunately, the interfaith movement is nobody's baby. Nobody takes it up. Each one takes up his own religion, but nobody is interested in interfaith. And I think that therefore we need to strengthen interfaith organizations and interfaith movements, because there are two dimensions to this problem. One is the conflict between religions. The other is the conflict within religions, between the fundamentalists and the enlightened people. For example, the Sufi Muslims are at the opposite pole of the jihadis. The Sufi shrines, as you know, in India, millions of people go there, of all religions, to Ajmer, to Nizamuddin and all. They preach love and compassion. But the jihadi, so within Islam there is this conflict. Within Hinduism there is this conflict. I go around the world preaching Vedanta, which to my mind is the quintessence of Hinduism. But there are people also who are trying to preach a very fundamentalistic type. Similarly with the Sikhs, I noticed some representatives of the Sikhs here. If you take the teachings of Guru Nanak Dev, they are full of love and compassion for everybody. And yet there were some people who tried to hijack it and create problems 20 years ago. So we have to move, and you, sir, I think it is religious leaders in each religion who have to come forward and boldly say, this is not religion. This is not Hinduism, this is not Buddhism, this is not Sikhism, this is a distortion. And young people also have got to realize that that is not the true face of religion. It is a long process, but it is overdue. And we are losing the battle because the jihadis have all the money, all the media coverage, and they are gradually spreading their tentacles around the world.
Are there any questions from other audience? Dr. Messi.
I should like to mention to Dr. Singh that I think the conflicts that we have all over the world now, one of the major items is coming from religion. Because we do not recognize each other, I think, and we don't understand religion means to life. So I think it's very hard to perceive these things. As a Buddhist people, they do understand about Buddhist, but not really deep. Just inside there, they don't understand. I think most of the people all over the globe do not understand about their religion deeply. That's why there's always conflict. And I think we do not recognize each other. Human beings are not recognize each other. The case in Africa, you see that. And the case in several other places as well. Even in India, I think you're a very, very well-known Ramayana also taught people about how to live together. But I don't think the Indians, many of them do not understand why they have to class themselves into different classes. Because we born equal in every sense, everything, every aspect. Recognition is not accepted by human beings. So that's why peace is in a dangerous situation, I think. What do you think about it?
Yes, I entirely agree. In fact, I mentioned in the course of my speech that much of the conflict in the world today still revolves around religion. And you are right, people don't understand the essence of religion. For example, the Upanishads have a marvelous word for the human race, Amritasya Putraha, children of immortality. Regardless of religion or sex or creed, each human being, by the very fact of being human, encapsulates a unique capacity for spiritual growth. That is not understood. There are many reasons for this. One is that our education has become, either it becomes fundamentalist education, like in some Muslim countries, or in some liberal countries they throw the baby out along with the bathwater. They don't teach anything about religion at all. So the result is, how will young people learn about religion? As generations go on, people are beginning to lose whatever roots they have in religion. And the only roots that are given to them are by the fundamentalists. That is a tragedy. So therefore, I think the answer lies on many levels, with spiritual leaders moving, with intellectual academic people moving, with educators moving, with schools moving. For example, the teachings of the Buddha are universal teachings. They are not directed towards any class or any caste or any religion. They are universal. Now, if the teachings of the Buddha were widely understood, then it would make a great difference. So I think it's a multi-dimensional challenge, and I feel that educationists particularly have to take cognizance of this.
Yes, I just would like to mention another dimension, and I would love to hear your comment on this one. I think when you're talking with when you're talking about humankind, the people, when they have more than two people living together, they have to develop this relationship, and more, the group is getting larger and larger. You have what become known as politics. People who live together and try to set up the rule, the rule of the society or the rule of the nation, and that's the politics. They will be the governed and not to and those who will govern and those who govern. I think that is the crucial point when when this politics come into play. So there is this process of seeking for power, and in the process of seeking for power, people will use different instruments, weapons, or all kinds of things. But you see, the problem is that religions have now become political instrument this day, and this political instrument has been used either in the way of fanatism or in the way of so-called independence, movement, or you see, creation of a new kind of nation state. You see, this using religion as a political instrument has been going on for centuries. If you look back in what they call the Crusade War, they're using religion instrument to seek for power and dominance, and this has continued until this day. So how, I think in your view, how you're going to use the interfaith movement to tackle this political dimension in all religions? Yeah?
Yes, you are very right, Professor, when you say that politics and religion are very often combined. Some religions were originally born, for example, Islam was born as a political movement. At that time, if you remember, with the Prophet and with the Khalifas, they were religious leaders as well as political leaders. So politics is built into the very texture of Islam, which is perhaps one of the reasons why you find the Islamic countries having so much problem coming to terms with democracy. If you look around you, with the possible exception of Turkey and maybe Bangladesh, most of the Muslim nations have dictatorships of one type or the other, either monarchies or military dictatorships. But the point is very well taken. You see, religion is always an important political aspect, and I don't think we can abolish that. However, I think there is a legitimate use of religion and there is an illegitimate use of religion. When religion becomes used as an instrument of violence and an instrument of blatant discrimination, for example, the most chilling event in recent times was the Taliban government in Afghanistan. The Taliban government in Afghanistan was the first time that a Muslim fundamentalist government came into being. So far the fundamentalists were individual groups, like Al-Qaeda and so on. But with the Taliban, they became institutionalized in a government. And there are other governments also, I don't want to mention them, where religion plays a very major role. So for example, in India, let me tell you, in India we've adopted a constitution where religion is not supposed to have anything to do with politics. But even there, because religion is so important to the masses, there are religious-based parties. And the other parties which are not based on religion are also making appeals to various religious groups. It is a very delicate thing, and I was said earlier, religious leaders should be educated. Educators must come into the scene. Politicians particularly must realize that a recourse to extreme religion will ultimately not serve their purpose. Because the only way to discipline a politician is to say that he's going to lose an election. And he is told that if have a backlash, then perhaps he will go up. So it is very right, the media must also play a role. The media is very important. For example, I gave the example yesterday in Bangkok. We had a Parliament of World Religions in Chicago 1993. 5,000 or 6,000 delegates came from all over the world, all religions. Not a word in the papers. And if there's a clash between two students or two groups somewhere, big headlines. Religious riots in India, religious riots in Thailand and so on. So the way the media also presents it, they will never present. Today I noticed, by the way, a good piece in the Nation about my talk yesterday. Occasionally. That is why I've been going around the world talking on interfaith, because interfaith is not sexy, it's not news. Whereas politics is always news, and violence is always news. So we have to educate the media, we have to educate the politician, the religious leaders have to come out, the educators have to speak up, the young people have to speak up. It's a multi-dimensional.
I would like to thank you for your very inspiring lecture. Yes, we cannot deny that interfaith dialogue is very essential today, but my question is slightly different. Suppose there is no religious conflict and social harmony, disharmony in society results from political cause. Let me give you one example. The state of Assam, from which I come from, state of Assam in the northeast of India, we never experience religious conflict as such, like other parts of India. The conflict which is coming up these days, students taking up to guns and students are training themselves in Myanmar and such places, acting like militants. This is a result of direct politics, or we can say the central government's failure to tackle one big issue like the Bangladeshi problem, infiltration problem. India is not very well in maintaining its border areas, so we have various conflicts. Since I know that you are also a political analyst, my question is, how do you think this kind of problems can be solved, which is beyond the religious realm? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. First of all, let me say that I have never said that all conflict in the world is due to religion. I've said that religion is one of the major sources of conflict. In addition, there are many other elements. For example, economic disparities. For example, discrimination against certain groups. And as the situation in Assam, they have certain ethnic problems also. There are various ethnic groups. That's why Assam used to be one state. Then gradually Nagaland broke away. Then Meghalaya, then Mizoram. Then each one of the tribes wants a separate state. And there is also the problem, you are quite right, of massive infiltration from Bangladesh. And I must admit that many Indian politicians not only didn't oppose it, but welcomed it because they thought vote banks would be created for them. So this is a clear case of political maneuvering, which has had disastrous results. So yes, quite apart from religion, there are other very important sources of conflict also. But at the present moment, I was concerned more with religion and religious. If we are able to mitigate religious conflicts, I think it would help to create a better, it wouldn't solve all the problems, but it would help to bring about a better situation. How long have you been here, by the way?
I should say that I am partly Thai because my husband is Thai. So now I'm more Thai than Indian.
All right, all right. तो दूसरी शताब्दी कब तक आने वाले थे? 48 साल हो गए। अच्छा, बड़े दूर बस से आके दूसरी जा रहे हैं।
Dr. Singh, you are from Kashmir, where the religious strife take place every now and then. Could you tell me about the role of faith in that state, or the positive role of religion solving or reducing the violence.
Yes, Jammu and Kashmir, that is the name of the state, Jammu and Kashmir. Kashmir is one of the units, the better known one, but it is a composite state built by my ancestors, in fact. We've had, you see, the partition of 1947. That really began the disaster because that was on the basis of religion. The Muslim majority states either opted out or were partitioned. Now, because Kashmir is a Muslim majority area, Pakistan has always said that it should come to Pakistan, but we have not accepted that because we have 125 million Muslims in India. 125 million Muslims. We have more Muslims than Pakistan. After Indonesia, we are the biggest Muslim country in the world. Now, if Kashmir, which is one tiny area, if that 50 years after partition is again cut off, then the reaction in the rest of India will be absolutely unthinkable. So we kept saying, look, you cannot claim Kashmir just because it happens to be Muslim majority. And we have Christian majority states in the northeast. Nagaland is Christian majority, Meghalaya is Christian majority, Mizoram is Christian majority. We have a Sikh majority state in the Punjab. We have Muslim majority in Lakshadweep. So India is a composite secular country where all the religions flourish. And Pakistan has been making attempt after attempt in the last half century to get it. Now, to answer your question, the interfaith movement is not strong in Jammu and Kashmir, unfortunately. Although originally, 7 centuries ago, there was a very interesting melding, as it were, a very interesting harmony between the Shaiva and the Sufis who came there. Even today in Kashmir, there are shrines of Muslim saints where Hindus always go. For example, I would always go there to pray at the shrine of the Muslim saints because they are Sufis. They are people of great spiritual power. However, the Wahhabis, you see, there is this vehement, virulent strain of Islam, known as the Wahhabis, who are the people behind the Taliban. They are trying to create this poison there also. And what we are trying to do is to counteract it. But I must admit that so far the interfaith movement has not been very successful there. What I am planning this year perhaps is to take a large interfaith delegation to Kashmir Valley. Because although I have come out of there now for about 35, 36 years, I still have my contacts there. And perhaps to start an interfaith movement. It's very important.
So really from KPI, I have one question. Last year I was in Lahore and went to the border to observe the military and take the flag down, and many thousands of people cheer up on the both sides, in India, land, and also in Pakistan and everything. So I think this, I don't know, how can we explain this, because the people there were really aggressive about that. That's very difficult to read this.
Yes, well, yes, it did appear very difficult, but you may have also heard that last month there was this meeting in Islamabad, and apart from the SARC meeting, there was a bilateral meeting between President Musharraf and Prime Minister Vajpayee, and there was also a joint declaration in which a lot of important measures have been taken. The roads are being reopened, the rail service is restarted, the bus service is restarted, air services have restarted, and there have been a number of agreements, and President Musharraf has said that he would not allow the territory of Pakistan or under Pakistan control to be used for terrorist strikes against India. So there is a hopeful beginning now, and it appears almost impossible, but I think that there is, apart from the religious thing, there are economic factors also at work. I think India and Pakistan both realize that if they spend all their energy against each other, their development will be greatly slowed down, particularly Pakistan. Because Pakistan is a smaller country. And if it continues to spend these huge... Why did the Soviet Union collapse? Because it tried to keep up with America. And it spent so much money on armaments and the army that ultimately the economy collapsed. Now, Pakistan also is going in that direction if it keeps on spending huge amounts of money. India also, but to a lesser extent, because we are a bigger country. I think the benefits that would flow from an Indo-Pak détente, from Indo-Pak rapprochement, are tremendous for the people of both sides, particularly for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, for trade, for commerce, for industry, for tourism, for development. And I think that after 9/11, and the way America now is more or less, as it were, establishing some kind of global dominance, if India and Pakistan don't get their problems sorted out, both of them are going to come into great difficulty. So I'm hopeful that perhaps this time we may be able to make an abiding breakthrough.
Yes, may I ask more or less a further question on your comment? Well, do you think that, these so-called regional economic cooperation, SAARC or BIMSTEC or ASEAN, would be the answer to the conflict more or less created by religious difference? Do you think this will be the answer to that?
I'm not sure whether it will be directly the answer, but it can definitely help. Because you look at Europe, for example. Let me give you this. Europe had religious clashes for 600 years, not between Islam and Christianity, but between the Protestants and the Catholics. For 500 years, they were massacring each other, although they were all Christians. They all believe in Jesus Christ. But the wars they fought, how many millions of people were killed? Today, the European Union has become one. Today, you can travel from Portugal to Poland and from Norway to Greece without a passport. So, economic interdependence and cooperation can, I think, create, it may not directly solve the problem, but it can create a situation where people are less likely then to be drawn into something.
Yes, Dr. Singh. All we know now in the world, we have a big conflict, particularly America, President George W. Bush. He did war in many places in the world. Do you think that your interfaith dialogue delegation can invite Mr. Bush to look what you are going to do and what really happened in his mind, Mr. Bush, or what religion he respects to? Yes, please.
Well, I must tell you that I presented my credentials to his father. When I was ambassador, Elder Bush was the president, and Elder Bush seemed to be a more balanced person. President Bush, there's a very strong Christian, born-again Christian movement behind Bush. And there is, all this thing about a new crusade with Bush as Richard the Lion-Hearted and Saddam as Saladin. Although Saladin was never captured, but Saddam has been captured. But this sort of a thing is there in the air, although nobody articulates it as such. But there is a very strong Christian coalition behind Bush. And I'm not sure whether Bush would accept my invitation to come. But nonetheless, I think that that's one of the reasons why I said if we, developing countries, can get our act together. ASEAN, for example, Japan has done so well. It was destroyed after the Second World War. Look at it. by mutual cooperation that we can create some kind of countervailing power to American dominance. And I'm not against America at all. It's a very great country and I've known it for half a century. But if we are weak, then automatically the strong will dominate. And our weakness derives from our intern-assigned troubles and conflicts. So if we can get over that and make, for example, the European Union today has emerged as a countervailing point to America. The euro is stronger than the dollar. And Americans don't like it, but the fact of the matter is that Europe has now become another pole. Japan is another pole. China is another pole. ASEAN can become a pole. SAARC can become a pole. If we develop regional groupings like this, then perhaps we will move towards a more balanced world. It will take some time, but maybe that will happen.
Any more questions? Well, I think if no further question on behalf of Konkan University, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Karan Singh. Please show him our appreciation one more time. Yep. And don't forget that next Monday, January 29th, we will have another case of this series, which is going to be the Foreign Minister of East Timor. He will deliver his talk at 9 o'clock in the morning, not 2 o'clock in the afternoon like the other series. Okay, thank you very much.